Tesla posted a video recently urging all of their shareholders to vote on Elon's compensation package and where the company is technically based out of. There's a lot to unpack with that whole subject, so we're not getting into that today. I mainly want to talk about some of the teaser images. There was a lot of new footage, by the way, in this video. I encourage you to watch it, no matter how you feel about Elon's comp package, just because there was a lot of new videos that I hadn't seen before, and a lot of them actually were pointing to the CyberCab design, which is supposed to be unveiled on August 8th. We'll see if that actually ends up getting delayed by anything, but it got me personally really excited. There was this one still image of obviously Franz working with another Tesla designer on the interior of the CyberCab, and way off in the distance you can kind of see silhouettes of this thing. And I have to admit, it does look fairly similar to the pictures of the Robotaxi that we found in Walter Isaacson's biography on Elon Musk. And a lot of people thought, well, if they're comfortable putting that in the book, it's probably not finalized, or they're probably not doing anything like that. But these new images they put in this hype video, in my opinion, kind of doubled down on that design. They've refined it a little bit more, but with this kind of wooden structure and this updated seat design, you can tell that while it may not be a three-wheeler, this very much looks like a two-seater bench seat, in my opinion. And other Tesla bulls online have been speculating along with me that Tesla is likely looking to mass-produce a vehicle. If it is capable of self-driving, we can argue whether or not that's possible, but if it is, the next goal becomes what's the lowest cost per mile we can get the vehicle. If you remove the driver, which is the most expensive part of the taxi, cab, Uber, Lyft, whatever you want to call it, then it becomes the energy consumption and of course the bill of materials for the vehicle that is the most expensive. And I think this is a huge advantage Tesla has. Even if we just look at the geo-fenced market of robotaxis, there's already robotaxis in the world. Google Waymo exists in many jurisdictions. There are also other robotaxis in China. The UK has recently approved some autonomous vehicle programs as well. So while it may not be at the insane volume that Elon was hoping for, robotaxis do technically exist, and it's just a matter of getting approval in more and more regions. And I think Tesla could arguably have the lowest cost per mile robotaxi because, unlike all of these other robotaxi companies, they're actually a vehicle manufacturer. And this design points to the concept of making something super aerodynamic, super slick, and also probably super cost effective, as they hyped a lot about last year with Investor Day, and bragging a lot, especially with the Cybertruck launch, with their steer-by-wire systems, which you kind of have to do anyway if you're designing a vehicle without a steering wheel and pedals. But the other thing that kind of got me excited about those off in the distance silhouette images was the doors actually opening a bit more like a butterfly or, you know, falcon wing style doors instead of traditional doors. These tend to be better and easier for getting in and out of a lower vehicle. They're also just inherently more futuristic, and if you don't mind me saying, this feels very Aptera to me. I mean, I know it's not exactly the same silhouette of the Aptera, but I feel like there were a lot of people skeptical about the Aptera as a product because they were just like, you can't focus too much on being too small or aerodynamic and just being a two-seater. People need vehicles to be more functional. But then it's funny to actually see a lot of Aptera's design decisions, like having a split window design, which we saw in the Robotaxi mock-ups of Walter Isaacson's book, and also having those vertically opening doors to allow for a more rounded aerodynamic profile across the top of the vehicle, makes me think that, okay, well, this probably isn't a three-wheeler, and yes, Aptera is going for like a solar-powered, individually owned vehicle, not a robotaxi. It's cool to see a lot of Aptera's design cues and efficiency goals brought over to a Tesla-optimized vehicle. Like, I think there's room in the market for both, especially considering in the past we've heard Elon and others at Tesla claim that this is a design that will be optimized for driverless, but if down the road robotaxis don't really go as quickly as we had hoped, this vehicle platform could easily be converted into a vehicle that we sell to individual consumers. And that got me really excited, the concept of like a mid $20,000 car. But what do you take out from that EV to make it not cannibalize Model 3 and Y sales? Well, you make it more aerodynamic, you make it more efficient, so that for 1 to 2 people it works really well. But if you need more seats than that, then they'll just tell you, well, you know, consider buying a Model 3 or Y. A lot of people have been scrutinizing the seat design we've seen in several of these mock-ups that Tesla teased us with, but I actually think it's kind of genius. Like, while yes, it's probably not going to be the most comfortable, convenient seat in the world, I think Tesla is likely designing every aspect of this vehicle to be as cost-effective as possible. You know what stood out to me about this new seat design, which some might call futuristic, some might say that looks uncomfortable and weird, is that they found a way to lower the cost of production of these seats and maybe several other interior components. I looked at that seat and said, man, it looks like maybe 5 or 6 of the pads that integrate into this seat are the exact same dimensions. So they could just crank out a bunch of these little panels, and that can account for pretty much the entire bench seat, and that way it's a lot easier to mass produce. And based on how those pads are designed, they might even account for other aspects of the design. That might be on part of the dashboard, is to have more of those individual panels. And if they're using a recycled material that's very cheap and cost effective because these panels individually are not that big, then that means they could probably crank out millions of these things for much, much cheaper than an intricate performance seat that we see in most of Tesla's vehicles that have specific bolstering and headrests. I like the idea that Tesla's designing a seat in an interior for passengers only, and because it's probably going to be designed not to be very great on the track. This is not a performance vehicle. It's not going to be doing any kind of heavy acceleration. You're not going to be drifting with this thing because it's going to be driving itself, and therefore will probably be pretty boring to ride around in. It's not going to be eventful. Everything this car does driving wise is supposed to be safe, optimized to be consistent and reliable and steady, which means that you probably don't need to worry too much about bolstering and keeping the passengers planted in their seat, because this car's never going to do anything that fancy in regards to its driving dynamics. It's going to be driving 1 to 2 people around, which, as we know, most vehicles on the road only have 1 to 2 people. That's why Aptera prioritized a 2-seater first. And in the case of the CyberCab, it's most likely going to be a fairly boring, uneventful drive. So you don't need a fancy seat. You don't need a bunch of headrest adjustments, because a lot of its rides are probably just going to be 1 to 2 people sitting in it for probably less than 30 minutes, depending on where the jurisdictions allow for robotaxis to operate. Elon may have some grand vision where nobody owns cars anymore because the robotaxis are doing all the driving. But to me, what these designs are showcasing is that if you need to do a long distance road trip in a robotaxi, you're going to be hailing a Model Y. You're going to be hailing a Model X with more seats that can move more people and more stuff when you're doing a major road trip. But the vast majority of drives, I think this kind of sub-compact Tesla with not the fanciest seats and maybe a split window design, because you're probably not taking the robotaxi through any kind of drive-thrus very regularly, and having a split window design reduces your aerodynamic profile, and having those vertically opening doors allow for a more tapered body structure that's more aerodynamic. I think Tesla's probably going to be targeting like a 30 to 25 kilowatt hour battery pack in this thing. Keeps the weight down, keeps the cost down. And one little teaser image that I really love made it look very Cybertruck-esque on the exterior. This is clearly not an image of a Cybertruck, but it looks very Cybertruck inspired, and that gives me hope that they'll likely skip the whole paint shop process with the CyberCab. Paint shop is arguably one of the most expensive parts of vehicle manufacturing, so if they can skip that and maybe just wrap the vehicle, or maybe even they have a stainless steel alloy in mind for the exterior of this vehicle, which might collect some fingerprints and some oil spots, but as we've seen on out-of-spec detailing, it's nothing really that cataclysmic. It's pretty standard on all vehicles, but paint is just a lot better at hiding it than the steel is on the Cybertruck. But this vehicle's probably not designed for being a personally owned vehicle, and if the car's cheap enough, people will have no problem wrapping it themselves if this does eventually turn into a vehicle that a consumer could actually buy and drive around in. But as a big fan of smaller vehicles and more efficiency-focused vehicles, this got me really, really excited. Even though I'm skeptical on level 5 autonomy with robotaxis, I love the idea that Tesla, as a robotaxi company, could make a vehicle that is designed from the ground up for most robotaxi rides, which is not what we see with the existing robotaxi networks. They always have to retrofit an existing vehicle into a robotaxi. So designing one from the ground up that's super aerodynamic, super efficient, and allows them to get 8 or 9 or maybe more miles per kilowatt hour, that gets me excited. And what would get me even more excited is just, you know, if Tesla would also go ahead and sell those. They don't have to be high price, even if it's not the most comfortable seat in the world. I think a lot of people would be interested in like a $25,000 Tesla that turns into a $18,000 Tesla after the federal tax credit. And sure, maybe it doesn't have the most amount of seats, but it would still be perfect for a lot of single people out there, or couples without kids out there, or maybe people that just want like a fun futuristic getaway car for the weekends. What do you guys think of these images? Do you think they're only showing them to us because they're wrong, or do you think they actually are giving us a pretty amazing sneak peek of what the CyberCab is going to look like? Hopefully we know for sure come this August, but feel free to speculate along with me down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.